Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Hello, this is the special city council meeting on Wednesday, April 7, 2021, and it is 6 p.m. We're going to call this meeting to order. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Hinsey?
Present.
Councilmember Lyons?
Here.
Councilmember Mosca?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Crayons?
Here.
And Mayor Blakespear?
Here.
Record will show all members of the City Council are present.
Okay, great. Now I would like to invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we're now on to our agenda item, which is City Council public hearing to review and consider the update to the city's housing element for the 2021 through 2029 housing cycle. And I will turn it over to Principal Planner Gates. And also just as a reminder to the public, this is a special meeting, so we don't have public comment on non-agenda items, but we will be, of course, having public comment on this item, and that will take place after we hear the agenda report. So go ahead.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. If I may, before I turn it over to Principal Planner Gates, I would like to share with City Council and our residents here in Encinitas a video on housing that the city staff prepared to emphasize the importance of this issue and the complications that face the city, all of us together. So if I may, I'd like to turn it over to Kieran to start the video.
Encompassing the best features of North County, from warm sand beaches to stellar parks, Encinitas is an incredible community that brings the amenities of a big city while maintaining its small town charm. Community is everything in Encinitas, from flowers to surfing to delicious foods or locally curated goods. Encinitas offers it all. With that, it's not surprising that residents love living here, but there has been a threat to our community and the people who help make the city great. Rising housing costs make it harder to provide suitable housing for workers such as teachers, nurses, and firefighters. Children raised in Encinitas can struggle to stay in their hometown, and longtime residents are finding their need to move away from the city they love. With the average cost of a home in Encinitas at $1.3 million and 73% of all housing in Encinitas set aside for single-family homes, down payments can be out of reach for a lot of these individuals. In addition, California state law requires all cities and counties to adopt a plan for housing to meet the housing needs for everyone in the community. The State Housing and Community Development Department works together with the San Diego Association of Governments, better known as SANDAG, to determine an appropriate housing target for every San Diego city based on factors specific to each city. While both the state and SANDAG note a need for more housing in Encinitas, no one wants new housing units to negatively impact our community. We understand that there are many valid concerns about adding more housing in Encinitas. Increased traffic, loss of community character, and respecting home values are all issues that need to be considered. We hear your concerns, and accounting for all factors, we believe there is an Encinitas solution that will allow us to add state-required housing thoughtfully. This will help us keep state grant funding for important infrastructure and active transportation projects in the community and avoid pricey lawsuits.
Lack of affordable housing can also lead to an increase in homelessness, which affects the community, requiring resources to manage. Having an approved housing plan is also part of the city's strategic plan for 2019 through 2020, and we want to make sure that Encinitas have a say as to where housing units are built, which might not be the case if the state steps in. The state and SANDAG determined that 1,554 affordable units are needed, 838 of which need to be classified as very low or low-income units. We know there's been some concern in the community when hearing the type of units needed. Given the median Encinitas household income of $113,175, the income threshold for very low or low-income housing is $64,700 for an individual and $92,400 for a family. This means the standard salaries for our first responders, healthcare providers, teachers, seniors, and retirees could qualify for low and very low income housing. With our choice coastal locale and desirable community, all of us want to experience the quality of life that makes Encinitas special. A safe coastal community with excellent schools. This will only be possible with more affordable housing options. So, how do we make sure we meet the state requirements to build this new housing? Well, we're already doing a lot to meet the thresholds set by the state. Since 2010, the city has processed permits for 440 accessory dwelling units or granny flats in the community. This program is considered a model for other jurisdictions and was awarded the prestigious Helen Putnam Award for Innovation and Leadership. Given its success, we can keep promoting our accessory dwelling unit program. Additionally, we can continue to identify new affordable housing locations. One new idea the city is exploring is a city-owned affordable housing complex in Encinitas. This could potentially help the city meet the targets established by the state and balance the concerns of the community. The city will be analyzing potential locations in the community, seeking public input, and determining feasibility and costs for such a project.
Encinitas creates opportunities for everyone within our community. You can see that in our investment in transportation and mobility, homeless action plan, our parks, recreation, and cultural arts programs. Let's do the same for housing in our community. Let's continue to work together, ensuring a housing plan that is the best for everyone in our community.
Yay! Nice job.
So I just want to give credit to Karen Parhar and Royce Pau, the vocal talent on that video, and to JPW for helping us with the script. With that, I do want to turn it over to Principal Planner Gates so that she can start with the presentation this evening.
Wait, so could I just ask, is that video available on our website, or where does one find that video?
It will be available on our website and on our YouTube channel. And we are hopeful that this will help our residents to understand the housing issue and the complications that we are all grappling with. Jennifer?
All right, well, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, I am bringing up the PowerPoint right now. Let's see. All right, does everyone see the PowerPoint now on the slide? All right, thank you very much. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the 6th cycle housing element update. And as we discussed previously, every 8 years, the state requires that each jurisdiction updates its housing element to address future housing needs in accordance with the Government Code Section 66583. The Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, is the agency responsible for tracking and determining compliance with the state housing law. On October 8th, 2019, HCD certified the city's housing element for the 2013 through 2021 cycle, or Cycle 5. This item tonight is on updating the housing element for the 6th cycle, which begins April 15th, 2021 through 2029. The city will need to adopt an update to this 6th cycle housing element by April 15th, 2025. So there are consequences for the city if the housing element is adopted after April 15th of 2021, or if the housing element is found to not be in substantial conformance with state law. If the city does not adopt a housing element by April 15th, it will be required to adopt a housing element every 4 years through 2037, or until the city has 2 consecutive on-time adoptions. If a housing element is not in substantial conformance with state law, the city will be vulnerable to litigation by the State Attorney General and other interested parties. and will be potentially ineligible for some state and regional funding, and other penalties that were described in attachment 2 of the staff report. The multiple lawsuits that resulted from the city's lack of compliance before the March 2019 housing element was adopted cost the city almost $2.4 million in attorney's fees, court costs, and payments to the plaintiff attorneys. The regional housing needs allocation for the sixth cycle is established by HCD and SANDAG with input from local jurisdictions to determine the methodology for the allocation of housing units for this planning period. On November 1st, 2019, HCD approved a methodology developed by SANDAG for the regional housing needs allocation. The final sixth cycle RENA was approved by SANDAG on July 10th of 2020. The methodology is found on SANDAG's website and was linked from the staff report as well as the project webpage. The sixth cycle methodology developed by SANDAG allocates 1,554 units to Encinitas, of which 838 units are allocated to low and very low income categories. This is one component of the housing element. The element is to plan for is the development of these units. As presented in previous meetings, the housing element process for the sixth cycle commenced in September with approval of the agreement with the consultant Kimley Horn and Associates. Public engagement on the housing element began in November of 2019 and was followed by a City Council Planning Commission study session on December of 2019 and a second public workshop in February of 2020. After completion of the initial public outreach, the city formally submitted the first draft of the sixth cycle housing element update in June of 2020 to HCD. On August 27th, the city received formal comments from HCD, which were discussed on the November 16th, 2020 special study session by City Council, along with staff's draft responses. To address the comments received from the community and HCD, staff with the direction from City Council updated the draft sixth cycle housing element, which we submitted to HCD in December of 2020. On February 4th of 2021, the city received formal comments from HCD on the February 16th. And on February 16th, staff presented the status of the sixth cycle housing element plan update with the draft responses to HCD comments at a joint meeting where City Council and Planning Commission provided further direction to staff. On March 4th of 2021, Planning Commission held a public hearing to review and consider the sixth cycle housing element. At the meeting, Planning Commission unanimously approved the Planning Commission resolution recommending approval of the sixth cycle housing element with the modification to incorporate a study on the impact of non-owner occupied short-term lodging and on the availability of housing. On March 11th, city staff had responded to HCD comments related to specific comments provided by HCD, as well as requested an informal review, as our request for a formal review on a shortened time frame was denied. HCD staff provided informal verbal comments on March 25th, and also on that date, city received notices of violation from HCD related to the density bonus ordinance and the group home ordinance, which have been provided on the city's project webpage as well as with the staff report. Based on advice from legal counsel, staff is recommending additional changes to the housing element section 1 in Appendix B in response to these communications, which we did submit to HCD for additional informal review. And on April 6th, HCD provided additional informal recommendations to staff, which were discussed in the memo to council that was provided last night. All changes are discussed further in this presentation, and the modifications from April 6th are visible in green font. And then April 1st is blue font, and modifications from February are visible in red font in the housing element that was attached to the memo. So what are the components of the housing element? So section 1 contains the housing element policy programs. This includes the goals, objectives, and timelines for each one of the programs. The programs are organized into 6 major subject areas that are required by the government code, which is our housing element law. That includes adequate sites, affordable housing, the mitigation of constraints to residential development, conservation of existing housing stock, affirmatively furthering fair housing, and at-risk housing. Appendix A is providing a summary of the community engagement activities that have been conducted, as well as all the community comments. Appendix B provides the required analysis that is outlined within the housing element law related to housing needs and constraints. And then Appendix C provides the required sites analysis for the provision of adequate sites, which are to accommodate the Cenas RENA. So this is the overview of the responses to HCD comments. So in their letter from February 4th, HCD provided comments that were organized under the following topics of housing needs and resources and constraints, as well as housing programs. And that's how the response to those comments are organized. So first, under sites analysis. So as previously discussed in HCD's verbal comments provided on January 11th, HCD did not accept the inclusion of a non-vacant Armstrong parcel and stated that the realistic capacity of the extra property needs to be reflected in the housing element. Staff has made those changes to Section 1, Appendix B, and Appendix C to reflect the removal of these sites from the sites analysis. And staff also updated the number of units that were issued building permits that were entitled in 2020. So this is the updated table that includes this information in Appendix B. Tables in Section 1, Appendix B, and C were amended to reflect the actual capacity of our 30 sites with no project applications, as well as the removal of the Armstrong parcel and the transfer of the Fox Point Farms to the list of approved projects. The city has calculated that the total number of units affordable to lower income households that can be accommodated in the city equals 1,605 units and will result in a buffer of at least 858 units, which is still over 100% of the city's 838 unit RENA obligation. HCD did not have any further comments regarding this component. And as a reminder, the city is required to track development by income level pursuant to Government Code Section 65863. And then if an approval of a development results in a reduction below the number of units needed by income category, the city is required to identify and if necessary, rezone additional sites within 180 days to accommodate that shortfall and ensure that no net loss in capacity. So in addition, the city recognized its obligations through the continuation of Program 1E, which is ensuring that adequate sites remain available throughout the planning period. And any site rezone will satisfy the adequate site requirements of the state law. And will also affirmatively further for housing. So the first program to discuss is Program 2D. And HCD's February 4th letter asserted that the density bonus ordinance passed in December is in conflict with state law and that the city must modify Program 2D to immediately remove or suspend ordinance number 2020-09 and apply the current state density bonus law. As directed by City Council and Planning Commission, staff requested a meeting with HCD. However, HCD did not respond to the city's request for a meeting. And on March 25th, 2021, HCD sent a notice of violation to the city, reiterating the concerns expressed in the February 4th letter, and that stating that HCD may notify the Office of the Attorney General when a city takes actions that violate the government code. Based on advice from the legal counsel and the likelihood that failure to include modifications to this program by HCD would result in a finding that the city's housing element does not comply with state law, staff is recommending that the program be amended as recommended by HCD in order for the housing element to be found consistent with state law. On April 6th, HCD provided additional informal comments to staff on Program 2D regarding the time frame to process this repeal of the ordinance, stating that repealing the ordinance is critical to obtaining a certified housing element. HCD is required to provide a letter stating compliance status within 90 days of submittal of the housing element by a jurisdiction. Staff looked at the time required for noticing and processing the repeal and has determined that the process could be completed during their 90-day review period. Therefore, staff is recommending that the timeline to repeal the ordinances be modified from 6 months to 3 months. And if this program is adopted as recommended, staff will begin processing the repeals immediately and concurrent with the submittal for HCD's review for compliance. In the draft provided with the memo last night, staff has amended Program 2D in Section 1 to state the city will repeal Ordinance 2020-09 within 3 months and will immediately process density bonus applications consistent with the current state density bonus law. On Program 2E, HCD has asserted in the February 4th letter that the group home permit ordinance passed in December discriminates against persons with disabilities and is also inconsistent with the requirements of the government code, which also prohibits discrimination against disabled persons. HCD states that the Program 2E must be revised to commit the city to immediately remove or suspend the ordinance number 2020-16 and uphold current state laws regarding fair and equal treatment of persons with disabilities without discrimination in land use. As directed by City Council and Planning Commission, staff did request a meeting on this item with HCD. However, again, HCD did not respond to this request. The city responded to HCD's comments regarding the ordinance in a separate letter, the city responded to HCD's comments regarding the group home ordinance in a letter sent by the city attorney on March 15th. And on March 25th, 2021, HCD sent the notice of violation to the city on this ordinance as well. They're reiterating their concerns expressed in their February 4th letter. Based on the advice from legal counsel, again, and the likelihood that without modifications to this program as directed by HCD, there would be a finding that the city's housing element does not comply with state law. So therefore, staff is recommending that this program also be amended as recommended by HCD. Like the density bonus ordinance, on April 6th, HCD commented on the time frame to process the repeal. Staff has amended Program 2E in Section 1 to state that the city will repeal the ordinance number 2020-16, group home permit ordinance, within 3 months instead of 6 months, and to immediately suspend enforcement of the ordinance. Neither the density bonus ordinance nor the group home ordinance has yet been approved by the California Coastal Commission, which did extend its review time to March of 2022. Thus, changes made by these ordinances have not been enforced by the city. The city will withdraw its request that these ordinances be approved by Coastal Commission if these program recommendations are adopted by City Council. HCD has requested that Program 3D be updated to include a commitment to post the additional analysis required by the environmental assessment on the city's website, along with other detailed objective standards required by the studies and mitigation measures. Staff has made the proposed modifications in Section 1 as directed by City Council and Planning Commission on February 16th. And the program has been updated to state the city will provide more information about the studies identified on the city's website within 6 months of the adoption date of the housing element. While the mitigation measures are identified in the EA, whether they will be applied to projects will depend on the impact identified, if any. On March 25th, staff received informal comments regarding the proposed modifications from HCD. And HCD had asked that the city clarify the applicability of the environmental assessment and the environmental impact report prepared for Measure T to the R30 sites, especially for the by right applications. Staff has provided further clarification in Program 3D that the EA examined all the R30 sites, which was adopted as part of the city's general plan as required by state law. Therefore, all developments on R30 sites must conform to the required mitigation measures listed in the EA to conform to the city's general plan. Only 5 of the 15 R30 sites were reviewed in the Measure T certified EIR. Therefore, those sites may tier off the Measure T EIR. City staff has been requiring by right projects to submit the studies identified in the EA, such as biological, geotechnical, and certain traffic studies. Additional clarification was requested on April 6th for the program regarding which of the 5 sites could tier off the Measure T EIR and discretionary process for the design review hearings for these by right project applications. These clarifications have been added to Program 3D and also modified to include language that are provided in the HCD technical memo on how Planning Commission can review and act on design review applications for by right projects. Whereas the Planning Commission reviews and can modify the design, but the residential use is not at issue. HCD also stated that Program 3F should be modified to include a monitoring program for the CPP and design review processes for by right projects to ensure only objective processes or standards are used. Also, HCD had stated that all programs should monitor the regulatory framework. This is already included in most housing element programs involving regulations, with amendments being completed within 1 year of the identification of a constraint. Staff is proposing to add a monitoring objective and timeframe for program 3F and others as needed. Planning Commission and City Council agreed to retain the CPP for by right projects because in the city's experience, the CPP reduces opposition to projects. Staff has incorporated the language requested by HCD into program 3F and modified the program to include a monitoring program for by right projects to ensure that only objective processes or standards are used and that required amendments be completed within 1 year of the identification of any constraint. Staff has modified other program objectives as needed to reflect this timeframe. HCD provided informal comments on these program modifications during a call on March 25th, requesting additional clarification on the processes available to applicants of a by right project that believe that staff or a decision-making body has applied subjective standards in its review of the project. Staff has updated the program, providing references to the Encinitas Municipal Code sections that describe the appeals available for determinations by the Director of Development Services, design review permits, and coastal development permits, and the appeal process overall in Encinitas Municipal Code Chapter 1.12. At the Planning Commission meeting on March 4th, 2021, the Planning Commission recommended one modification to the housing element to incorporate a study on the impact of non-owner occupied short-term lodging on the availability of housing. Staff recommends that program 5C be amended to include the effect of non-resident occupied short-term rentals on housing supply with the displacement risk analysis. Because displacement does not occur when resident owners and renters choose to offer their homes for occasional short-term lodging, but rather when non-residents use their homes for short-term rentals. So the next steps for this project, if adopted as recommended, staff will submit the housing element before April 15th, 2021 for review by HCD. Staff will also begin the repeal process for the ordinances. So staff recommendation for tonight is to first adopt the resolution with these amended changes as proposed. Resolution number 2021-16, titled A Resolution of the City Council, the City of Encinitas, repealing in its entirety the 2013 through 2021 housing element and adopting in full text comprising of the 2021-2029 six-cycle housing element update to the general plan, and as well as to direct staff to return to City Council with ordinances to repeal ordinance number 2020-09 and 2020-16. And this concludes staff's presentation. And Barbara Kautz, our special counsel, is available, as well as representatives from Kimley Horn for any questions that council may have.
Well, thank you for that presentation and that video. I know we have public speakers, so I'll just see if there are any clarifying questions from council. I actually do have one question about the non-resident occupied short-term rental analysis. So how do you propose to be doing that analysis, or what exactly is the kind of deliverable from that?
So staff, as part of the displacement risk analysis, we'll have to go out to hire a consultant, and they will be pulling information for specific to this in regards to our short-term rental that we actually currently have within the city. Some of them are owner occupied and they may rent a room out of their home. And then some also may be renting their entire home. And so we want to get a better understanding of how many of those homes within the city are actually being rented as short-term lodging. So this will help. This is part of the information that we do collect, is basically how many homes within the city are being used for full-time residency versus a vacation or a temporary lodging facility.
Right, so you expect that the deliverable from this would be something like, we have 500 short-term rentals, 350 of them are being used by non-owner, non-resident occupied. Is that, and so then whatever that number means to us is something we would just take in context of whatever other vacation rental ordinances we're considering? Or is there some kind of analysis of what? So, I mean, what I'm getting at partly is that some people have a second home, so they wouldn't be actually doing anything with it besides keeping it vacant. Other people might choose to rent it for more than 30 days and provide housing. Other people might sell it if there was like a tax on vacancy, you know, so the analysis of what exactly it means that we have that many, is there going to be a further analysis of that, or is that just something we'll have to figure out?
I think that'll be part of the overall study of displacement, and we're looking at a lot of factors. This was just one of those factors that Planning Commission wanted to look at to make sure that was included within the displacement. So of the housing units that we currently have available to the community for rent or for residents, how many of those are actually being utilized for, you know, rentals or for living on a day-to-day basis of our total.
Right. Okay. So it's just a number basically. Okay. Councilmember Kranz or Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Yes, thank you. You said in the presentation that one of the incentives for submitting this to HCD by April 15th has to do with late housing elements being required to submit housing elements every 4 years. And isn't it true that because we were so late with the cycle 5 housing element, we're already on the 4-year cycle?
We are on the 4-year cycle right now. So we do have a housing element that is due in 2025. And then the new cycle will begin in 2029. But if we submit this one on time, as well as the next one on time, then we will not be on a 4-year cycle. We'll be back on the 8-year cycle.
So in essence, a month or two late isn't really going to affect what happens in 2025. We'll still have to we still have to do a housing element in 2025.
Correct. We'll have to do 2025. If we do not make this one and 2020, then we'll go all the way to 2037.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, just to follow up on that question. So one of the points about us being so late in the last cycle, in the 5th cycle, was that we had to comply with the state laws in effect at that time, right? So if we do get ourselves on an 8-year cycle, then as housing law continues to change and have more and more requirements, we'll have already certified, and we won't need to be basically certifying with later dates, right? Like it'll give us a longer period of not needing to go through the process. Is that true?
My understanding of what happened last time is that amendments were made to state law right when we were trying to submit. And so we did have to reflect that within those amendments. So yes, that would occur again every 4 years during those cycles, that we would need to reflect all law changes within that time period.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Don't see any other hands up. So let's go to the public comment.
Okay, we have about 12. So I'll start. Just a reminder to the speakers, you do have 3 minutes. We'll start with Geraldine Kessler. Geraldine, can you hear me? You can start speaking. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm speaking on behalf of Jennifer Hewitson and our people that were organizing against the stavers. I am deeply saddened to see what is happening within our city regarding the housing element and the density bonus housing laws. What I see is an overreach by the state to force Encinitas to allow rampant and unfettered high-density growth, regardless of the consequences to the neighborhoods and the environmental impact, increasing congestion, traffic, and destruction of that which citizens have fought to preserve for many decades. Why does Encinitas feel the way it does in comparison to other coastal cities? It is the result of hardworking citizens who fought to preserve some of the beauty, open space, rural character, agriculture history, and down-to-earth land use perspective. Now, after endless debating and handwriting meetings, legal fees, billable hours paid by the taxpayers, you came up with a local ordinance 2029 whatever it is, which was recently approved. Although not what local citizens see as a great option, since it should include requirements of low-income units of 20 or 20%. It is still seemed much more reasonable than the AB 2345, which is a BIA dream. Now, since the state didn't like what you came up with, you are voting to repeal that ordinance, just like that. So Encinitas is expected to bow down to builders, the state roll over and say, never mind, we'll just make it go away now, or very respected city attorney who argued the benefits and legality of this ordinance now says, never mind. Our mayor and council who represents us sees the BIA and the state threatening lawsuits, and then they say, never mind. What have we become? Where is this leading? I'm discouraged, sad, angry, and I feel utterly unrepresented here. You know, most of the citizens don't have any idea of what is happening. They will never read the ordinance or attend a council meeting. It is all complicated and convoluted, even to follow. Well, some of us are paying attention, and while we pay the bills for all the circular and, in the end, potentially pointless housing slog, we do not like what we see. Gross acreage calculation based on estimates, even exaggerated acreage on tentative maps, which incentives to fudge the numbers of acreage because, hey, they'll just round it up and get even more houses. Unbuildable land is included. Why not? 50% density bonuses, endless waivers, building restrictions, no exceptions or considerations. Anything or anyone else, minimal parking, tiny setbacks, half-baked management plans, toxic runoff, traffic impact, congestions, out of character building, neighborhoods, no problem, you have it. Anyway, we're just not happy.
Thank you, Joanne. Our next speaker is John Schuster. John, you can start when ready, and you do have 3 minutes. John, you need to unmute your microphone.
Let me start over. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, well, okay. So Madam Mayor and City Council, thank you for the opportunity to comment. What I want to comment about is not on your current list of low and very low income candidate sites, but it's another emerging project that proposes to benefit greatly from AB 2345. As you heard in the previous commenter, it's the property owned by the Staver Family Trust and borders Melba Road west of Crest Drive. The proposed plans for this 6 2/3 acre property, which is zoned R3 like the surrounding neighborhood, is 30 single-family homes, rather than the 18 to 20 homes suggested by the current zoning. This is because 2 of these homes will be designated for low income and 1 home for very low income, which under AB 2345 will qualify the entire project to have a 50% density bonus, along with waivers on minimum setback limits and maximum height limits. So this development is built if this development is built as proposed without taking thoughtful input from the surrounding neighborhood, it will stand out from that neighborhood like a sore thumb and potentially present traffic and safety problems as Melba Road is a corridor used by students and parents to access Ocean Knoll Elementary School, Oak Crest Middle School, San Diego Academy, and several private schools and preschools. On the other hand, if this development is built thoughtfully, it will be a benefit to the community. I want to draw your attention to the neighborhood Torrey pine trees that will be impacted by the proposed development. The plans previously made available to us state that all existing trees not specifically designated on the landscaping plans for conservation will be cut down. There are several mature Torreys in the easement along Melba Road and several majestic Torreys along the west border of the proposed project. And these Torreys have been carefully preserved over the decades. They are avian habitat for several species, some of which are endangered. Generations of school children, including my children and my grandchildren, have passed by and been awed by these trees. The proposed plans will either cut down the Torreys along Melba or leave them in a narrow sliver of dirt sandwiched between hardscape and swampy stormwater retention areas and disturbed by grading and placement of underground utilities. Those trees could not survive there. The trees along the west boundary might also be impacted by the project. I and many of my neighbors are requesting that the proposed project plans be modified to ensure the survival and future health of these beloved neighborhood trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schuster. Next speaker is Steve Graw. Steve, you can start when ready. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. Hello.
Yep, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. I was going to talk about the homeless situation. I was going to talk about the homeless situation in Cottonwood Creek Park, and I received a note saying that no other subjects would be implemented at this meeting today. So I wasn't ready to talk today, but I will if you give me a few minutes. I'll talk about it. I think everyone should know what a disaster is going on at Cottonwood Creek Park.
Just proceed with your comments if we can still hear you. There's some feedback or you're cutting out, but go ahead.
Yeah, I heard her. Okay, so here's what I want to let you know is that at Cottonwood Creek Park and Trails, I've sent emails with pictures of the homeless situation there to all of you asking for help, starting in January. I've received no replies from anyone. And the environmental damage being done in Cottonwood Creek from the many homeless encampments there to native plants, vegetation, the creek bed and banks, things have been altered with trails recklessly being cut, wet garbage, trash of all sorts, needles, human feces. And so far you've all chosen to ignore my pleas for help with this. The presence of fecal bacteria in the water there is usually the result of problems with sewer systems and septic tanks. But California water quality officials agree that the source now of fecal bacteria is California's growing homeless population. According to the director of San Diego Water and Quality Control Board, while E. coli is present in both human and animal feces, human fecal contamination is particularly dangerous because it transmits disease that affect people. An example, hepatitis A and cholera. Most people are not at risk of getting sick unless they drink the water, but people washing or wading in the water face a very high risk if they have open wounds. I probably don't need to remind you that Cottonwood Creek drains into Moonlight Beach, where many children play. And many children play in that creek at Cottonwood Creek. The Cottonwood Creek falls into Kelly Hinsey's region, and I've asked her and spoken with her a few times about it. The response from Council Hinsey has been nothing but excuses, that nothing can be done due to COVID restraints, the Boise decision, and a lack of resources. All of these excuses bolster the observation that we are being overrun by homeless and don't have the resources to handle it, but we are encouraging more and more to come. I've gone down into Cottonwood Creek and spoken to approximately 4 of the individuals down there. None of them are from the area. So we're not helping our local people. I'm now looking at legal avenues to pursue and several ways to educate the community at large. These seem to be the only things council and the mayor respond to. We no longer feel safe using the trail and are heartbroken at the irreversible environmental damage you are allowing to happen to this once beautiful natural spring.
Thank you, Steve. Our next speaker is Cynthia Cremona. Cynthia, you can start when ready, and you do have 3 minutes.
Hi, Kathy. Do you have my slide to tee up?
It's putting it up right now.
All right, great. Mayor and Council, this is Cindy Cremona. I'm with Encinitas Viewpoint. The Council is repeating in the 6th housing cycle the untruth it told to HCD and residents in the 5th housing cycle. The Council is once again claiming 100% of lower income housing units will be affordable. This is the lie. The Mayor and Council know that 15% affordable housing units is the most you will approve. The Mayor and Council well know that by claiming 100% affordability versus 15%, you get to downplay the true number of housing units needed by 85%. For those listening at home, let that sink in. 85% short the number of housing units required by state housing law. By using 100%, you get to say that we need only 838 housing units. It is a lie when you state that the buffer is more than adequate. I use the word lie because if you were honest about the numbers, you would use 15% and admit to residents and the state that we will need to upzone for 5,587 housing units. And this doesn't account for density bonus, which will push the true number above 7,500 housing units. In fact, the city has now received 2 letters of warning from HCD that the city had better start using, quote, numbers in line with reality, unquote. So even the HCD is claiming that you, Mayor and Council, are lying. 5,587 additional housing units equal 27 additional Goodson housing projects to meet state requirements. Tony, how many of these 27 Goodsons will you take for District 1? And where will they be located? Kelly, how many will you take for District 2? And where will you put them? Joy, the same questions applies to District 3, and Joe for District 4. How many more lies are you willing to burden your constituents with? Why is it that other cities are honest with their residents and don't play these numbers games? Maybe because they have nothing to hide? And how do I know this? Because I checked. It's time to stop pandering to your BIA sponsors and to consider the residents and city you are supposed to be looking out for. And by the way, now that restrictions are lifted, when can we expect to return to in-person council meetings? Escondido is one city that's just announced its return to in-person council meetings. What's your excuse not to? Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Theresa Beauchamp. Theresa, you can start when ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Honorable Mayor, City Council members and staff, thank you for your service and thoughtful approach to affordable housing. 84% of folks employed in Encinitas commute to work from other cities. Many commuters made up my family practice medical support team and earned $15 to $20 per hour. They could not afford the $2,100 average monthly rents here. My staff often jumped at opportunities to leave our practice to work closer to their own homes that were not in Encinitas. Many medical staff commuters are members of the BIPOC community. I'm a member of Encinitas for Equality, and we aspire to create an Encinitas for everyone, where a greater diversity of people in terms of income, race, and ethnicity are able to both call Encinitas home and know that they are essential threads in the weave of this community. To achieve this goal, I support the city's commitment to building an affordable housing community that may house our essential workers, where they will not pay more than 30% of their income on housing. This will require strong local leadership, land, and public subsidies. The housing element plan increases low-income housing. Unfortunately, it is bound by flawed state requirements that force high-density building at market value, coupled with only small percentage of affordable units. However, to not adopt this plan puts Encinitas at risk of lawsuits by the state and loss of control of land use. I am hopeful that the city's feasibility study of the El Camino Real corridor will identify a commercial property that can be repurposed into a location for an affordable community and avoid development of green space. The corridor is adjacent to public transit, within walking distance to employment, shopping, and restaurants. We have an extraordinary opportunity with the makeup of this council. You all have the courage to do the bold, right action to create an Encinitas for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Theresa. Our next speaker is James Frost.
Hi there. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Honorable Mayor, Council, and staff, I just want to let you know, as a resident of Encinitas for 35 years, since actually Encinitas became a city, we were a city adopted by the residents because we wanted to forge our own future. As far as repealing the bonus density, you need to know that it is in unscrupulous developers ballpark when you do things that will benefit, just out of control development. The HCD has got a very heavy hand, and I understand your problems and your conundrum that you are in, but we need to look at who lives here. The people live here. You are employed by the people. You are voted by the people. The people are who you need to satisfy. It is a community of people that supported you in your office. I just want to make this known that HCD, with their very heavy hand and aggressive manner, can be, I believe, swayed to look at from both sides of the story. I think you can modify the bonus density to include net, but also make some other revisions as well to the overall plan that will help. I think it really is going to require a lot of out of the box thinking. But we should try to remember that we want to forge our own path, and the residents here really need to know that you're on the side of the residents. And please make it known that to the HCD that this is not going to be easy. And I have seen 3 or 4 neighbors move out, and I live right next to the Goodson project. This is not going to be an easy transition for anybody. So I've seen the letters from HCD. I've seen Goodson's attorney's letters. It's a shame. And where are those additional 140 or 107 units going to come from after the Goodson project gets built, if it gets built. I hope you have, like Cindy said, 2 or 3 more Goodson projects in backing that up just for that one development shortfall. So anyway, with that, I want to say thank you for your service and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kevin Doyle. Kevin, you can start when ready.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Kevin Doyle, Planning Commissioner representing Old Encinitas. I've been dwelling on this case for a week, racking my brains, trying to see a way forward. And I don't envy you the position that you're in right now. Our back is against the wall. What most concerns me, and I think this probably most concerns most of you, is the density bonus ordinance. The swap from gross to net is so huge. It is such a, and it's such an easily defensible position. Now, I know we're probably going to have to cave on this. HCD has us in a place we can't get out of, and having to do this every 4 years till 2037 is nothing anyone's looking forward to. It eats up too much of our time. But if there's a way to preserve the density bonus ordinance, I would even consider recourses as great as putting it in abeyance and perhaps suing somebody like the state of California. We've been on the receiving end of so many lawsuits, and you know, we take it. We get hit all the time. This is one I think is worth fighting for. And I don't know, I hope you on council, mayor, deputy mayor, and council members, God, I hope you have a silver bullet in your back pocket. But I don't have any really great help for you here. I just know that the density bonus ordinance is a well-crafted piece of legislation, and the idea of using gross acreage to build a housing development is kind of ludicrous on the face of it. It's easily, a reasonable person has an easy time seeing how it fails. We did a development on Santa Fe a couple of years ago where the density bonus was based on acreage that was actually in the middle of Santa Fe. It was an old lot. It went right out to the middle of the road. And they calculated that and used that to increase the unit count. And I'm not gonna rattle on. I won't use my 3 minutes, but thank you for listening and thank you for your service. Really, it's important to us all.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker is Bernard Minster. Bernard, you can start when ready.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, Mayor Blakespear and Council. My name is Bernard Minster, residing in Old Encinitas for the past 41 years. My wife CJ and I became active in the city's housing element update debate in January 2015, when Assemblyman Chow introduced AB 744. Between January and June 2015, we attended innumerable Encinitas city meetings, wrote letters to the Assembly Transportation Committee, Appropriation Committee, 12 other Assembly members, to the Senate Appropriation Committee, viewed all the committee meetings, floor debates and votes, made presentations to the Planning Commission and to the Council, demonstrating that AB 744 did very little to increase the stock of affordable housing, but instead increased significantly the number of market price units. We met with the staffs of Tony Atkins and Pat Bates, and ultimately wrote a letter to Governor Brown asking him not to sign AB 744 without prior amendments. Except for Senator Bates, we were repeatedly told that the BIA had such vast resources that the bill written by developers could not be defeated. In 2016, we attended at least 11 city meetings and workshops on the housing element. In 2017, we attended all meetings of the Housing Element Update Task Force and made video recordings of all of these, which I still have. Then we step back from the scene, waiting for the new housing element and for the outcomes of lawsuits against Encinitas. Needless to say, when Ordinance 2020-09 was approved last fall, we experienced a feeling of accomplishment. While not perfect, it reflected the outcome of an enormous amount of collaborative effort and expense by citizens and government of Encinitas. This was a good faith attempt to help with the housing crisis of California, while mitigating the flaws of state laws that result primarily in increased density of market price units and achieve minimal affordable housing. We expected the ordinance to become effective by January 15 with or without Coastal Commission approval. Imagine our disappointment when today's agenda is a resolution to repeal the ordinance in toto and to process all applications to the city according to AB 2345. What was the point of 6 years of strenuous work by staff and citizens to seek a balance between needs and impacts in our city? If all this is thrown out with a stroke of the pen, if the answer is again that money talks, then I fear that city government has ceased to be of the citizens, by the citizens, for the citizens of Encinitas. This makes me, at the very least, quite sad and disappointed by the inability of the council to protect our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Our next speaker is Juliana Maxim.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I am here to ask that you do not yield to HCD intimidation in writing the city's housing element. The notice of violation the city received only clarifies that we in Encinitas, what we have been saying all along. HCD's interpretation of housing policies puts developers' interests first and reduces their responsibilities towards our low-income residents. Incentivizing is the new term for making rich and protecting profit. Here's just one example of the pro-developer bias that runs through that letter. In its density bonus ordinance, the city of Encinitas seeks to protect the size of affordable units and ensure that they are generous enough to accommodate families by requiring them to be at least 3/4 of the size of market rate units. That is a good call that helps poor tenants because large units are scarce and expensive. HCD does not like that and calls the expectation that developers provide such large units to low-income tenants a disincentivizing impediment. As soon as affordable housing policies threaten to reduce the developer's bottom line, HCD comes to the rescue with new incentives that further erode gains in affordability. In HCD's interpretation, a developer can get relief from planning and design guidelines by building a 500 square foot studio next to 6 5,000 square foot mansions, while also claiming the moral high ground. It makes the head spin. The notice of violation also illustrates how policy is shaped by a tight circuit of influence that runs between for-profit developers and the public agency. To give an example, the lawyers of the Goodson Malk project are cited in the notice, and in return, the language of the notice made its way only a few days later in the lawyer's letter to the city, reminding us one more time that the Olivenheim project is a test case and at the core of this fight. In California, the urgent need for cheap housing has been co-opted by land speculators and by the building industry. HCD is answering the developer's call by pushing an incentives racket and by drowning out any discussion of non-market solutions. It is time we recognize that for-profit developers have never and will never provide stable and affordable housing to working-class families. Please stand up to the HCD juggernaut. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bob Kent. Bob, you can start when ready. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Bob Kent, Encinitas resident, member of Keys for Homes. We are local residents who advocate for the building of affordable homes in Encinitas. For our seniors, millennials, and family residents, as well as for our essential workers, earn between $15 to $20 an hour and are commuting long distances or finding difficult living situations in order to stay here in the city they serve. We support the adoption of the sixth cycle housing element so the plan could be translated into action, the actual building of more affordable housing. We understand there is no single solution, so we support the city's efforts to enhance the tools required to build a diverse mix of affordable housing, including accessory dwelling units. We are encouraged that approximately 25% of the ADUs built are affordable. Inclusionary housing, we support increasing the percentage of affordable housing if economically feasible and not a disincentive to building affordable homes. And collaboration with other agencies, such as the city's recent decision to join CalCHA, which will hopefully create both lower income and much needed middle income affordable housing. The ADU and inclusionary programs help move the needle by currently yielding somewhere between 15 to 25% affordable housing, and hopefully those percentages can increase. The biggest takeaway here is that the private sector by itself cannot solve our affordable housing challenges. That is why we support the city's commitment to build a 100% or as close as possible affordable community in Encinitas. So rather than having 1 in 5 units built affordable, 100% of the units, or at least a much higher percentage, are affordable for our seniors, grocery store workers, medical technicians, public safety and service workers, and so many others. This will require your leadership, community engagement, public-private collaboration, a significant financial commitment from the city for a local match, and of course, land. That all said, this process is far from perfect. And so while we support maintaining local control, we are concerned that if this plan is not adopted, we run the risk of more taxpayer-funded legal fees, litigation battles, and potentially a loss of local land use control to the courts. Therefore, we respectfully request you adopt the housing element so we can do our part and move forward and build a diverse mix of more affordable housing in our community. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Bob. Our next speaker is John Bilso. John, you can start when ready.
All right, I think you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can.
Well, thank you very much for taking my comment, Mayor Blakespear, members of the Encinitas City Council. So I'd like to speak in support of the city density bonus law that you passed a few weeks back, which is very thoughtful law. And I must also oppose the staff recommendation to repeal it. Nothing actually in state law mandates that, for example, the city abandons its zoning code. And basically, I completely agree with many comments here, especially with Kevin Doyle's comment, that basically it's very important that net acreage is kept as a way of basically, as a method of calculating density, as it is already written in development standards. But I would like to basically focus on something a bit different. So the notice of violation that the HCD sent to you on March 25th is a very clear misinterpretation of Encinitas density bonus ordinance. And also it's a clear misinterpretation of the state law. Sadly, HCD continues to interpret state law that is advantageous to for-profit large developers and to the detriment of the people of California, of Encinitas. So I'd like to attract your attention to one point. For example, HCD, like Juliana said, wants us to repeal the rule that basically makes affordable units at least 75% of the average square footage of market rate units. HCD doesn't like that. But why not? To whom does HCD's basically request or interpretation or imposition serve? So HCD's letter effectively enables developers to provide only tiny studio apartments or one-bedroom apartments where the bedroom doesn't even have a window, and basically limit affordable floor area of those developments into minuscule parts in otherwise gigantic luxury apartment complexes. So if HCD and the paid lobbyists of the building industry win, low and moderate income residents will have access only to very small units. So I also would like to bring to your attention that HCD's violation letter arrives only after the city planning staff very thoughtfully found that one developer, Randy Goodson in Olivenheim, whose project is under review, has made a last-minute change, once more a bait and switch, to limit low-income units to only studios or small one-bedroom apartments. So when nobody was looking, he quickly removed all 2- and 3-bedroom apartments and put only tiny units as affordable. Everything else is luxury and market rate.
John, that is your 3 minutes.
Right, very quickly, I would like to appeal to you to defend our city and the public and the principle of local control planning against HCD and the building industry lobbyists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Suzanne Klausenstock.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Mayor Blakespear, City Council members and staff, it's truly frustrating to see the City of Encinitas possibly relinquish all common sense planning to the state. The main point of building these R30 developments was to actually build affordable housing. Yet in the last year's R30 submittals, only 214 of the 1,387 market rate units were slated for low-income housing, of which only 39 are for very low income. With numbers like that, I'm not sure how the entities who champion affordable housing can possibly feel their cause is being fairly represented. Encinitas, like other small cities in California who do not have an excess of undeveloped land like Carlsbad, San Diego, Chula Vista, we need to regain some control over how these large developments negatively impact our city, especially when the payoff of affordable units is so small. HCD states in their notice of violation letter that density bonus laws have been strengthened as earlier versions were not deemed incentivizing enough for the developers. So they added more waivers and more concessions. At what point is enough enough? Most of the R30 developments in Encinitas are not amazing, but at least they seem reasonable, with the exception of Goodson and Olivenheim, of course. What I find infuriating, though, are the developers like Goodson, which will cry to HCD about any rational pushback from the city, and immediately HCD is fighting on their behalf. Who is the state really representing? And more importantly, we hope you are representing us as our elected city officials. The concern of lawsuits should not make you shy away from doing what is right to protect your residents. I would imagine there are more and more cities in California that are fed up with the state throwing all these incentives to the developers and not allowing each city to have reasonable parameters in building these upzone developments in their own communities. I think we should look at joining up with some of these other cities and build a case against HCD. Most of all, please don't give in to HCD. Continue to fight for this wonderful city we live in. We appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor, that does conclude public comments.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll go to my council colleagues. Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. Just a quick question on those last points that were raised. I heard the concern from the speakers that we will be seeing really tiny affordable units matched with really huge luxury units in the same building. And is my understanding correct that we've limited the maximum square foot for average unit size on all of those buildings so that you couldn't get quite that spectrum?
The R30 sites does have an average unit size that is part of that review process that we will be looking at for each one of the R30 projects.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question for now.
Okay, Well, I will, okay, there's the deputy mayor with his hand up. Go ahead, Councilmember Kranz.
I wanted to follow up on that response. So what you're saying is that there's an analysis of the average. So that means that if they make certain number of units very small, they can then make certain number of units very large. Is that, am I interpreting that correctly?
So the average, I just looked up the actual number. The maximum average size of dwelling units in the project shall not exceed 1,000 square feet of floor area for the rental projects. So you will see some that are larger, like the 3-bedroom versus a studio, which would be maybe 300, 400 square feet.
Right, and the way to get the average to have the luxury units and still meet the average requirements is to have some smaller units as well, significantly smaller. So you go the opposite direction and you identify the significantly smaller units as the affordable units, and then you have your luxury units that you can make quite a bit of money off of. So I think that's an important distinction. I wanted to talk about a few things and look back at a couple of things. And I know that one of the things that keeps coming up is that we should stand up to Sacramento. And I will point out that we have experience with that. We did that in 2014, that the density bonus ordinance required, it was originally the interpretation that we needed to change our approach to calculating the number of units on a parcel by rounding up on our base density calculations instead of rounding down, which was our general policy. And so the city council in 2014 made the decision to round down on that base density, yet as per the density bonus ordinance, round up when calculating the number of density bonus units. And the result of that decision by the city council was a lawsuit and essentially started us down the trail of litigation that resulted in a cause of action, which included not having a housing element, and put us in this kind of nightmare cycle of putting together housing element to try and, as part of the settlement agreement on those lawsuits. And then Measure U and Measure T were both on the ballot, and then into court for a judge to decide that we had to do what HCD told us to do. So we ended up in the position where we didn't have any local control over our housing element for cycle 5, and it was essentially a nightmare. And so here we are in cycle 6, and we were proposing to not change much because we were fortunate in that the RENA obligations that were assessed through the SANDAG process actually lowered our responsibilities under RENA. So we had a housing element that had the capacity in it to not have to be modified, not have to upzone any additional sites. And so this 6th cycle is essentially the same as the 5th cycle in terms of the number of parcels. We've made some changes, and I thought we were on track, but we've run into some significant problems with this feedback from HCD. And I strongly object to their assertion that the density bonus and the density bonus ordinance and the group homes ordinance need to be repealed. So here we sit tonight, and we've had a lot of feedback. We got a memo last night with some additional requirements that HCD has imposed upon us. And I think that this sense that we're making this decision under the gun is very, very troubling, and one that I'm not comfortable with. We also received today a 10-page letter from an attorney that I thought had some analysis that I would like to hear our attorney respond to some of the points that were made in that. And I don't think tonight at this meeting is the right time for that. So I'm very interested in not making a decision on this tonight and instead coming back after having further analysis and looking more closely at some of the points that were made. And so that's where I sit right now. I'll be very interested in hearing what my colleagues have to say. I also am wondering, what is it about the repeal requirement? Why is it that we can't modify and address some of the specifics instead of just throwing the whole thing out and repealing the density bonus ordinance?
Well, my understanding is that HCD doesn't expect you to repeal your entire density bonus ordinance, but basically to return to the ordinance that existed prior to the adoption of the December amendments. The prior ordinance essentially basically deferred to state law and didn't have a number of detailed requirements. But it would have the effect, if you did that, of allowing a 50% density bonus rather than 40%, and also going back to using gross acreage. So, but I mean, the city would still have a density bonus ordinance, but they want, their HCD's position appears to be that all the provisions that were adopted in December are illegal. As you know, we wrote a rather lengthy letter to HCD disputing a lot of that. And there are some, and the city could go back after repealing the ordinance, could go back and attempt to, take a closer look and make some changes to the ordinance. For instance, we think that the provision in the former ordinance that allowed a developer to have affordable units with only the minimum number of bedrooms arguably discriminates against families with children, which is a protected class in the fair housing laws. So there are some changes, but HCD's position right now seems to be that that everything in the ordinance doesn't conform with state law.
Okay, and like I said, I have problems with doing this under the gun.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. Deputy Mayor Krantz hit on what I was going to ask about. And so maybe I could just drill down a little bit more. The staff, having to do with how the staff recommendation is. The staff recommendation is to repeal the density bonus. I'm curious about the process associated with that, because it almost sounds like we need, over 3 months, we need to edit our density bonus. If you could just clarify that for me, I'd appreciate it. And maybe it's just the use of terms that's being used.
Yeah, the precise language could be modified, but the process would be, you already adopted both the group homes ordinance and the density bonus ordinance. If this program is adopted, there would be a proposal to the Planning Commission initially, because zoning ordinances must be recommended by the Planning Commission. So there would be a recommendation to the Planning Commission, basically to readopt the density bonus ordinance that was equivalent to the ordinance that was in place prior to the adoption of the December ordinance. Does that make sense? And then after the Planning Commission made its recommendation, that would come to the council.
Okay, yeah, that is different than what I understood. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and make my comments here. So I appreciate the public comments and all the many emails. We've received lots and lots of emails on this topic, and the work from the staff and the Planning Commission and Planning Commissioner who called in, Kevin Doyle. Making this decision right now, from my perspective, comes from having spent the entirety of my time in local office in Encinitas really struggling with the 5th cycle of our housing element. So it's 6+ years of the difficulties and the disputes that we've had, legal disputes, regulatory disputes, disputes with our community, disputes with each other, disputes, of course, with HCD, which has been just a tremendously difficult process. And I think for me, my vote for tonight will be that we adopt this housing element on time because it's the responsible thing to do. I think that we are better served as a city if we avoid a repeat in the 6th cycle of what we got into in the 5th cycle. And, you know, I don't truthfully know, and nobody's really shared with me what happened on the 5th cycle, like in 2013, which was when it was supposed to be adopted, if they considered it and rejected it in the face of a lot of opposition from the community, if it was never put together. You know, I know that there was a big effort toward putting together the housing element from a consultant that was thrown out, and there were various community groups formed, ERAC and GPAC, but I don't know if they were ever in this position where they were sitting on the doorstep of a 6th cycle or the 5th cycle at the time and decided not to do it. And I just support this. I urge my colleagues to support this. I think that adopting a housing element for the first time in our city's history is a really good precedent to start us on. I think we are better served by complying with the laws as they are right now than getting ourselves into the situation where we're facing lawsuits from the state and also from all of the different litigants who would come out of the woodwork really to skewer us. I mean, we are already so under the microscope with everything that we do here. There's no doubt in my mind that we would be landing ourselves in court immediately. And it would be in a similar situation as last time where it was a lawsuit we couldn't win because we don't really have a good reason not to have an improved housing element. And saying that it's because of community will or because we want to do it differently or we want our land use control maintained, you know, those are not legitimate reasons not to be in compliance with state law. So I do support us moving forward with this. And I also just want to re-emphasize something that the deputy mayor said, which was that this 6th cycle for all of us, I think it was a complete shock that we did not have to add more housing units because the way that it seemed that the cycles were going was that there were always more housing units, total units added. And we heard the presentation that said, and the number was 800, very low income units of 838, moderate income units of 308. And that when you look at those numbers, you know, we have 25,000 housing units in our city already, homes in our city already. And so adding within this 8-year period, 838 very low income units and 308 moderate income units, I do feel as if that's possible and doable for us. And especially as we're heading off and we've directed our staff to do an analysis of where we could have a 100% affordable project. If we're intentional about that and we're trying to create the housing opportunities for people at all income levels, and I think we recognize that as a key to a vibrant community, that we can accomplish this. And so doing that and not getting distracted with additional fees and costs and litigation and just the amount of time and effort we would spend in the dispute, I think we're better off. I'll just, before I conclude here, I just want to refer back to the staff report, which nicely summarized that in this one sentence, the multiple lawsuits that resulted from the city's lack of compliance before the March 29 housing element was adopted have cost the city $2,396,870 in attorney's fees, court costs, and payments to plaintiffs' attorneys. And then it says, since 2017, the state has adopted harsher and harsher penalties against cities that do not have an adequate housing element, with the possibility of a fine of up to $600,000 a month for a city that refuses to comply. And then, importantly, in addition, the city has been subject to far more scrutiny from HCD than any other city in San Diego County. So my goal is for the city to get ourselves into the position where that is not our status anymore, where we are compliant with state housing laws. We are working to develop housing at all income levels in the way that we want to add them, and that we are not in this kind of similar position. So I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the staff recommendation. And I don't know if the staff recommendation has changed based on the 3 months instead of the 6 months. Maybe I could just ask staff to clarify that with the adopted resolution for the 6th cycle. Oh, we can't hear you, Jennifer.
Sorry, I am muted. With the adoption of the 6th cycle would be inclusive of section 1 and appendix B as proposed with the memo last night.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move staff recommendation. No.
I will go ahead and second that. And just to echo the mayor's comments and to really thank Kevin Doyle and the planning commissioners who put all that time and effort taking community input to get our own density bonus ordinance in place that actually achieved a lot of the goals that the state has for us, including taking so much of our subjective language and converting it into objective language and really moving the ball forward on that. And to have to repeal that at this time is shocking. And I think it's counterproductive. But I also think that there's a time to push back against the state, which we've done before. And we've sometimes been successful and sometimes not successful. And in this situation, I just see we have really low chances of success if we do push back against the state on this ordinance, and extremely high costs. And I think that the urgency that I feel as a city council member and the responsibility to the constituents to make sure that we're using every dollar that we have in our general fund to prepare our infrastructure, to prepare our roads and streets so that they're walkable. I don't want to spend that money on losing lawsuits. I'd rather spend that money investing in making the community able to get around and to continue feeling vibrant, even though we will be adding units. There are a few things that, you know, I think last year or 2 years ago when we approved the cycle 5 housing element, the feeling was that, and I think this is how the mayor articulated it, but it was that we were ripping off a Band-Aid. And this one feels a little bit more like we're turning a page because we have accomplished so much. We have accomplished so much ADU production. We've accomplished, you know, having advocates like Bob Kent here speaking and Theresa Beauchamp and members of Encinitas for Equality that really understand that all of this complex language and alphabet soup of zoning and planning really does translate into units, and that we need those units. We do have a housing crisis. We are trying to prevent homelessness. We do want members of our community who have grown up here and are aging here to be able to stay here. And that's essentially what we're doing tonight. And then I hope in the next cycle, the mid-year cycle, we're actually embracing housing in a way that shows this type of excellence that we do in all the other parts of our city, in the services that we deliver, in you know, in the beautiful streets that we create when we really put our time and energy towards that. And so I think that there are still 3 things that I really want to see us do before this next mid-cycle update in 2025. And that's not only study the impact of short-term vacation rentals on our city, but like cap that and find out a way that we're not seeing the overproliferation of these, you know, non-owner occupied short-term vacation rentals, that we're preserving the existing gentle density that we have, that we're not seeing, you know, gorgeous bungalow courts be turned into from 5 units back to a single family home. We really need to preserve the existing density that we have and even incentivize that further. That matches with our historic character. And that we are continuing to really engage this community who I think has a new enthusiasm for taking control of what housing looks like in our city. Instead of having these things be a punishment for us, how can we get excited about projects like this 100% affordable, excited about projects that are transit oriented, excited about mixed use on El Camino Real, and you know, not just do that with the people who have the luxury of so much time to come to meeting after meeting, but make it tangible. Go to Encinitas for Equality, go to their multicultural center and do workshops there and provide engaging speakers that talk about, you know, missing middle and all of these things that I think can really help us become an excellent version of ourselves here in Encinitas for housing. So, oh yeah, and then the last thing is just continue to work hard on ADUs, because I remember getting an email from Kathleen Lees early in my office where she said, you know, the ADU seminar put on by the city was in such high attendance that there was no parking available and there was no seating available because people are so hungry to learn about how to get more ADUs. So let's continue doing that. And yeah, let's spend every dollar that we can on improving our city rather than trying to fight losing lawsuits. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mosca.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to staff for the presentation and for the work that they've been doing. I know that it's been kind of up and down and back and forth with the state, specifically with HCD, and it's not an easy task. And so I thank you for your professional advice and for our attorneys for their advice and helping us navigate this complex system. I do like the video that Roy, that you've with your voice and that you guys had a hand at putting together. I think it really does help because the gap is growing in terms of what folks out there know about housing law and what it is. And so we really do need to do more to make sure that we're educating people about what the process is and what state law and our responsibility at the local level is. Having said that, you know, I've spent the last almost 20 years, if you can believe that, in local government. I've been at it working in elective office and involved in local office since early 2000. And I can tell you that I've witnessed the transition in housing law. It wasn't all that hard that long ago to comply with housing element law. It didn't have much teeth. You know, it's been around since I think Ronald Reagan's time. Bless you. But it didn't really have say again? But it was yeah. So, but it wasn't all that complicated to deal with. But one of the things I think has created more complexity here is that the state has decided, as they've seen the supply and demand go off the charts, meaning that there's more demand for housing in our state than there is supply, that they have to get involved and that they have a role to play in this arena, which they had never played in before, and in an arena, in an area where local government, cities, counties pretty much put together the zoning rules and the development standards. And the state now thinks that they have a role to play and that this is a vital state interest. And legally, according to our Constitution, they obviously can carve out that space, and they have been, and they've been getting more assertive in that space as the supply and demand has gotten off balance in the state of California and also in other parts of the country. And so that just adds to the complexity of our job in kind of putting together a housing element that's looking at affording housing opportunities for folks at all parts of the economic spectrum. And so our job is to plan for all those economic levels. And in our city specifically, it gets really difficult at that lower level. Organically, it happens at the upper levels, but not at the lower levels. And the state says that at the lower levels, we have to zone in a certain level to accommodate that. But it's become much more difficult. I think the fifth cycle was the height of the difficulty, and the court actually getting involved and saying this is what you have to do. And I think that also showcase or highlights the issue with non-compliance, and that is that I know that for some this is kind of counterlogical, but you actually lose control. In the time that I've been involved in local government, it's always been about local control and really advocating for local control, because at the local level, we know best about our cities and how to really govern our cities. But what I've witnessed is that non-compliance leads to a loss of control, that other folks are coming in and telling us how to do things. And so I think with the sixth cycle that we're beginning to emerge from, with some clarity about what our role is. And even though that's changing all the time with the state, that we do have some level of control. And so acting smartly in the future in terms of how we proceed allows us to assert maximum local control about where the sites go in our city and how they sit on those sites and how they're developed. And so I think the sixth housing element is not perfect, but you know, it does allow us to assert maximum control, and it doesn't get us involved in lawsuits that we cannot win, and doesn't get us involved in, you know, all kinds of acrimonious situations with the Attorney General's office, with the state housing agency that is empowered to enforce state housing law. It basically allows us to control the process as much as we can, because again, a lot of it is being taken up by the state because they believe that it's important enough to take it up. And so I'll support this update to the sixth housing element. I do hope that some of the ordinances that we're changing tonight, specifically the sober home ordinance, that we're able to revisit when the law on that, the federal and state law kind of work themselves out, and perhaps there's a window for us to regulate in this space in the future, or perhaps there's not, because federal law or state law says that there is no window for local government to regulate. But if there is, I hope that we'll see this again, and we'll look at something so that we can allow our local residents to have a little bit more control over some of the where some of these homes would be placed in our community. So anyways, thank you to the staff for all that you've done to help us navigate this process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Blakespear. While I really believe that the density bonus ordinance that we've worked so hard on was well-intended and was appropriate for the time, I do think that state law is changing, and the arc of those changes over the last 8 to 10 years, I think Deputy Mayor Kranz captured that very well in his statement about how we've pushed back in the past. But what it comes down to is that abiding by this state law is the way forward that we have chosen. And I think it's important to stay on that arc. I believe we have many other ways that we are approaching the right outcome here. And my colleagues have mentioned those already with ADUs and 100% affordable housing. So I won't go into that again, but another way that I want to present briefly is to consider the point of view of how we characterize our design standards. And one of the things I read in almost all the comments was that we want to maintain our character and our charm here in Encinitas. We want to preserve that as we move forward. Being a design professional, I know that these are the challenges that design professionals deal with all the time. We're given an opportunity to design a place, and we have the challenges of how do we do the best outcome? How do we create the best outcome? And believe me, there's thousands of ways to do that. There is no one right answer. So I wonder if we might consider, as we move forward, how do we achieve those best outcomes with objective requirements that maintain the charm and the visual and the environmental appeal of our city as we move forward. And I would even throw out there that sometimes it's not a matter of density. If you have something beautiful that conforms and integrates well with its context, you can have a higher density, and you might not even know it because it's designed so well that it's just a benefit to the community. So I would like to just throw that out there for food for thought, that our outcome is we want to maintain a beautiful city, and we want our new development to honor that as well. And we can craft, and we have crafted, objective requirements Some may be tied to our sustainable committee work, sustainable building committee work, where we're looking at, meeting our climate action plan requirements. But we can do this in a really focused and intentional way so that it's just one other tool in our toolbox to make sure we have the outcome that we're all saying we want. That was my comment.
Well, thank you. Deputy Mayor Krantz.
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm just a little bit shocked that here we are tonight considering adopting a housing element where we commit to repeal an ordinance that we enacted in December. With a whole lot of debate, a whole lot of input. We had some of the best attorneys that money could buy provide us input on the drafting of that ordinance. And I think it serves the community very well. And I tend to agree with our legal counsel that it complies with the law. Yet here, the bureaucracy in Sacramento is telling us that in order to get our housing element approved, we have to agree to repeal that. And I think that's just a terrible way to make a change to that particular law. There may be, there are some disagreements on the law, and there are ways to address those disagreements, and it may be to modify the current lawsuit that we have with HCD to get declaratory relief on the issue related to the housing element. The density bonus ordinance. We could, so I do have one question of staff, that the unanimous approval by the Planning Commission on March 4th, they haven't had a chance to, they dealt with something entirely different, right? That approval? The housing element that was under review on March 4th, that was a unanimous approval, has been changed significantly because of the notice of violation and the changes that we're looking at tonight. Is that correct?
Excuse me, that's correct. But you need to refer it back to the Planning Commission if the council considers something that the commission did not consider. And at that meeting, at the Planning Commission's meeting, HCD's February 4th letter was in the record, and that February 4th letter also talked about how the density bonus ordinance and the group home ordinance should be repealed. So that issue was presented to the Planning Commission. At the time, the city was attempting to meet with HCD. It had, we had contacted through the Attorney General and directly to HCD. The council's direction was to try to see what their specific concerns were, if some of the ordinance could be preserved. But as the staff said, they never, frankly, they never responded. They never responded in any way except to issue the notices of violation. But the letter from the HCD's letter, which recommended appeal, was presented to the Planning Commission. In the staff report, it stated that the staff wasn't recommending any changes at that point because we were trying to set up a meeting. But the issue itself was presented to the Planning Commission. They were aware that that had been HCD.
Well, my point is that we could adopt tonight the same housing element that the Planning Commission unanimously adopt.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could we not?
Yes.
And we could submit that to HCD, and statutorily we'll have met our obligation to submit a housing element by April 15th. And
yes,
so, this notion that we have an obligation to make a decision under the gun based upon these notice of violations and these verbal conversations, just to me it's a situation that I am uncomfortable with, and that I would prefer to look at a number of different scenarios than just rolling over and accepting the requirement that we modify the housing element to meet the HCD's verbal admonitions. And I know that they've got the notice of violations, but we haven't had a chance to prepare a response to that even. And so, you know, it seems to me that we have an obligation to the community to work a little harder to get to the point where we are, you know, not just throwing in the towel on these very important issues to our community. And let's also make it really clear that our planning department, our development services department is currently processing a half a dozen projects that came from the cycle 5 housing element. And we are facing a building boom in our city like no one has ever seen in a really long time. It's probably been since Encinitas Ranch was developed that we will see the building that we're going to get between the Fox Point Farms. We've got the Sunshine Project. We've got the Quail Meadows. They're just project after project. And so, you know, it's a double insult because we adopted a housing element under court order that HCD basically got to dictate to us what we did. And so out of that, we are going to have a ton of development. And yet that's not good enough. It's not good enough. And I just disagree. Under the law, we have good attorneys that helped us to develop an ordinance for our density bonus. And this idea that they're going to threaten us with not certifying cycle 6 just is not something that I can accept.
Thank you for your comments, Deputy Mayor. So I don't see any other hands up, and we have a motion and a second on the table. So let's go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Hensy?
Yes.
Councilmember Lyons?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz?
No.
Mayor Blakespear?
Yes.
Motion carries with Deputy Mayor Kranz voting no.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the staff for all your hard work and to our outside attorneys as well for all your hard work and our inside attorneys. Let me go back to the agenda item. I don't think there's anything else on it.
There is nothing else, Mayor.
Okay. Well, our next meeting, let me see. Well, when is our next meeting? It's next week.
Next week, April 14th.
Yes, okay. Okay, well then, thank you very much, everybody, and we are officially adjourned. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.